Good evening, folks. I'd like to welcome Ross Thornley from AQ AI to share his new body of work, Decoding AQ. Ross has been in conversation with us for the last couple of years. He got off to a great start with the book and then decided to bin it and start again. But I'm sure it's going to be worth the wait. I thoroughly recommend reading in it. There's a couple of lightweight versions of the book for those that like to just absorb information quickly. But I'll introduce you and hand you over to Ross now, who can give us a wee bit more information and give you a wee introduction into decoding your AQ. Welcome, Ross.
Thanks, Donald. Been looking forward to today. Like you say, long time in the making.
Thank you.
So are we on? Over to me?
Yes.
Oh, magic. All right. Well, thank you, Donald. Hi, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. We've got a jam-packed session, and in true sense of the fact that the world is accelerating in an exponential fashion, a lot of this content is going to come at you thick and fast. We will be sharing the deck. So alongside the recording that Donald and the team will be sharing, the deck will make available. And we've also got a number of other assets and links that you'll be able to get connected to. I'm going to share my screen and we'll dive straight in. Here we go. So those who've got the video up, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen? Magic. Thanks, Erin. Thanks, Donald. Brilliant. Thanks, Rory. All right. So content for today, leading in an unpredictable world, and how do we cultivate radical adaptability so that we can ensure organizational success? So that's as an individual, in our own careers, the teams that we lead, and then our organizations by proxy. You can find out some more info. Our web address is there as aqai.io, and please feel free to reach out if anything that I say resonates, or along the way you accidentally learn something, then feel free to email me as well along the piece. All right, so the session we've got into two parts. So part one, I really want to spend some time just setting the scene, just really understanding what's going on in the world, what is driving some of this appetite around adaptability, around how do we respond to change? How do we navigate this complex world that we're living in? And then in part two, start to explore some of our models, some of our science. I know that a few of you here already have taken the assessment, which was great. So I might at the end, if you want to, in the Q&A, share some of the insights and data from some of your results. But I'll be introducing something called our ACE model, which is our ability, our character, and our environment. These are all factors and dimensions of our adaptability. And then starting to just begin our journeys to understand what some of the strategies or steps that you can take. And as I mentioned before, a few bonus insights along the way. First thing I'd like us to do is just, what do we think adaptability is? What does it mean to you? And is there a current project or challenge that you're facing at work at the moment? So open up the chat. Let's try and make this a little bit interactive. What does adaptability mean to you? Could be one word, could be a collection of words. If you're like Donald and you've read the book, you know, cover to cover, then you might have more to say about it. But what does adaptability mean to you? What does that word mean to you? And is there a current challenge that you're facing at work that you want to share? So I'm just going to give you a moment or two to just pop into the chat and see what starts to come in. Okay, so we've got a few starting to come in. Changes made in order to increase survival, origin of species. I like that, Erin. Being able to move with changes in the workplace, appearing natural to embrace change. Nice, like that. Thanks, Amit. Rapid response to change for adaptability for J. Responding to opportunities and challenges by making fairly quick changes to behavior. Like that, Debbie. Couple more. Being able to mold yourself into a new situation. Everything, anything, anytime. Tom, maybe that's inspired by the film, you know, everything, all at once, everywhere. I think one of the things about adaptability is both we as individuals, as human species, adapt, but we also have an opportunity to adapt our environments. So we can influence our environment when we seek a change that we don't want. You know, we could go on strike, we could change a process, change a system, we can do things where an external piece that we don't want to fit in, we actually don't like anymore, we don't think it's relevant or fit for our views of how society should be. We might want to change systems. And equally, we might go into a new role, a new area, a new team, a new process, and we have to adapt ourselves. So that continual balance, and it's a poetic dance through a variety of phases of adaptation that we'll also cover today. So thank you for sharing some of your initial thoughts. Another one there, Paula, being resilient, a great word, and able to respond to new situations and environments. Absolutely great. And I'm sure that there are many challenges that people are facing, some that they've chosen, others that they might not have chosen. You know, it might be a challenge that's come along from a regulatory point of view, or from a technological point of view, or maybe from leadership within the organization, or maybe an industry is shifting that is meaning we're having to face challenges. And they can be good challenges. We might see them as maybe bad challenges that we don't want to have. For us, there's a distinction I'd like to make between adaptability and this term AQ. So Donald mentioned it at the beginning, the book that was released last year about decoding AQ. So adaptability, it is a skill, and it's essential to our psychological health, our social success, our academic and our workplace achievement. So there's countless different descriptions of adaptability, whether you're looking in the dictionary, Wikipedia, or all sorts of different books and pieces, but that's one that we quite resonated with here at AQAI. And AQ is meaning the metric. So how do we measure this thing called adaptability? And as I mentioned before, this model, ACE, ability, character, and environment. So all of those factors and behaviors, characteristics, skills, all blend to help us in the way that we respond effectively to uncertainty, new information, and change circumstances. Many of you might be familiar with EQ, our emotional intelligence, or IQ, our cognitive intelligence. AQ is one of the most important pieces right now for us as a human race. Just to rewind slightly, why am I here? What am I doing? Maybe many of you are asking yourselves the same question in your life at different points. And for us, we have something called a massive transformational purpose, our MTP. What is a purpose as our organization? And for us, it's to inspire every human with those skills to adapt and thrive, ensuring no one's left behind in this fastest period of change in history. Every moment in time, in fact, the slowest point of change we've experienced is now. It's only ever going to get faster. So in all of these areas of where things are converging, globalization, technology, all sorts of pieces are now nesting on top of each other to have an ultimate effect of change, feeling like it's going so quickly in all areas of our lives. And the pandemic came about and gave us a sure wake-up call to some of those things of shifting change, both for good and some things for not so good. We also have something of a big goal. We call it a moonshot, and that's to transform the health and well-being of 100 million people by 2030. We're going to be doing that by helping people, guiding them to successfully navigate this future of work. So by measuring and then improving our adaptability in two ways that are really important: at speed and at scale. We're not going to be able to do that by ourselves. So we do that through collaborations and partnerships, and you'll learn a little bit more about some of our collaborations and partnerships in order to try and make this big moonshot from a vision to a reality. And hopefully some of you maybe that we meet today might come on that journey with us. As I mentioned, it was important to get a context. Why now? Why is adaptability important? So I've got a few slides that I'm going to go through to just give us a sense. If we turn the news on, if we look at any news online, any of these places, we will see so many different stories, predominantly negative. The reason why is it sells. Negative news sells. It reacts to our brain makeup. It's what we look for. So whether it's big banks like Silicon Valley Bank going bankrupt and going bust, to floods, to jobs going, to people deciding, hey, TikTok is not something that we should have on certain devices in the UK government, New Zealand government, Australian government, now even BBC talking about certain apps that they don't want to have over fears of privacy. We have other things going on and happening that whilst there's wars, there's veg shortages, there's strikes, there's also things in technology and areas that are maybe less seen, less in the mainstream media, that I want to introduce you to some of these a little bit. I'm going to play a video now. It's about 4 minutes. It's very poor audio. And the reason for that is it's a live stream recording from an event that was just a day or two ago that I normally go to every year, but I'm not there in person this year. It's called A360, an Abundance 360. It's a select group of people to get exposed to some of the latest technologies that are happening in the world. And this 4 minutes talks about 10 meta trends. So I'm going to play this for you, but as I say, the audio is not great. So please turn up your speakers, and I shall just let this play for a moment. Give me a thumbs up if you get the audio coming through. Here we go.
Increasing global abundance and giving birth to the next few trillion-dollar fortunes. Our first meta trend is the awe-inspiring speed with which we are blanketing the Earth in gigabit connectivity, linking everybody and everything 24 hours per day at ultra-low cost. Billions of people and devices are exchanging data, transactions, points of view, music, Google searches over an ever-expanding 5G terrestrial network and thousands of orbiting Starlink satellites. This is a future of abundant information and connectivity in which you can know anything you want, anytime you want. Our second meta trend is Web3 and the metaverse, a social and ownership layer on top of the internet, providing self-sovereign identity, connecting people, places, and things. The metaverse will guarantee authenticity and chain of title across time and space via blockchain, profoundly impacting every industry from retail and advertising to education and entertainment. The third meta trend is a revolution in how we feed 8 billion people. Today, cellular agriculture, stem cell-based beef, chicken, and fish, they're already in production and getting government approvals. Meanwhile, massive vertical farms are producing healthy greens 24/7 year-round. Over the decade ahead, we're going to reinvent how we feed a hungry planet in the most ethical, nutritious, and environmentally sustainable fashion possible. And speaking of sustainability, our fourth meta trend is the continued emergence of globally abundant and cheap renewable energy. In the near term, the most exciting news is coming from advances in perovskite solar cells, yielding 24% efficiency coupled with breakthroughs in batteries. But that may pale in significance as dozens of companies race to demonstrate and deploy commercial-scale fusion by 2033. What if instead of treating your genetic disease, you could cure it permanently? What if you could cure AIDS, enhance various genetic aspects of your physiology from strength to immune function? And what if you could bring back extinct species, ranging from woolly mammoth to dodo and Tasmanian tiger? That's the promise of our fifth meta trend, CRISPR and gene therapy. Our sixth meta trend focuses on increasing human health span. A dozen game-changing therapeutics, including epigenetic reprogramming, stem cell supplementation, senolytic medicines, coupled with the power of AI and quantum technologies, has the potential to help us slow, stop, and even possibly reverse aging. Every additional healthy year we add to humanity is worth $38 trillion to the global economy. What will you do with an extra decade or two of health span? Megatrend number 7 is the rollout of high bandwidth brain-computer interface, or BCI, the awesome ability to connect your neocortex to the cloud. BCI is already here, helping paralyzed patients communicate using just their thoughts. But imagine being able to think in Google. By 2033, Ray Kurzweil predicts our ability to expand our senses, augment our memories, and enhance our intelligence. Next up, Metatrend number 8 is the arrival of humanoid robots and avatars, fulfilling service jobs that are dull, dangerous, or dirty. Elon Musk said it best about the Tesla bot. This technology will upend our idea of what the economy is and bring about an age of abundance. Towards the end of this decade, we will experience our 9th metatrend, the deployment of quantum technologies. Technologies like quantum computing, quantum imaging, and quantum sensors that have the potential to revolutionize medicine, energy, and communications. They also have the potential to solve problems that are currently intractable using classical approaches. Our 10th and final metatrend is artificial intelligence, specifically its pervasive deployment throughout our lives, and the expectation that it will reach human-level intelligence in the years ahead. Ray Kurzweil predicts human intelligence by 2029. Elon Musk predicts it will grow vastly smarter than any human and will overtake us by 2025. And while this may cause fear for some, it's important to realize that this technology is our greatest tool for slaying grand challenges and creating global abundance. So there you have it, 10 metatrends for the decade ahead. How will they power your MTP and enable your moonshot?
So thank you for just trying to consume from the fire hose 10 metatrends and what they might mean in all sorts of areas of your world and your work and your life. There is no doubt about the fact that the change we're experiencing today, certainly within this decade, will be equivalent to the last 100 years of innovation and change. And so that is very, very hard for us to understand. What we are really sure of is that we're definitely living in this VUCA world, a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. And many organizations, teams, and people are suffering and at risk of collapse. And countless people do not have access to that kind of personal support and training that they need to make sure that they keep pace with it. The realities are is technology is increasing at this exponential rate, and humans aren't adapting at the same rate. So there's this disconnect between where we are as humans and where technology is. Let's not forget, technology is inert until we give it a purpose. How do we as humans deploy it to which problems, to which challenges? How do we want to augment our capability to make it even better? Just to give a couple of examples and land this for some of you, you may or may not have come across ChatGPT. This is a large language model that allows you to access this large language model via a chat interface. Version 3.3 was launched now, just last couple of weeks, version 4 has been launched. And it went from 0 to the first million users in just a few days, but to 100 million users only took 2 months. If you look at some of these others, you know, Instagram over 2 years to get to that stage, or 6 or 7 years for Uber and Google Translate. So this speed of adoption is massive. For those of you who don't know what ChatGPT is or what it might mean, let's take a look at this chart here. And along the bottom, we've got various exams. Exams that, for example, are the bar for legal, or for example, the US medical licensing exam. These things normally take a human being many years to learn, many years to study, deploy maybe in practical examples before they can pass these. In blue is the last version of GTP 3.5, this chat interface of a large language model, and it was passing a lot of these. Deployed just a few months later, version 4 in the green, it shows you just how many of these exams it's passing. So from AP chemistry to AP biology to history to maths to all sorts of areas that it is now able to be in the top 75%, 90 percentile. Now, what this means is you can all have access to that level of capability for $20 a month. Where, as an assistant, how would you recruit, find, deploy? That level of breadth of intelligence at that accessibility is a profound difference. What was this time last year versus today is entirely different. So we have things like Google going on red alert, you know, to defend their search. The founders have come back in. We have areas where Microsoft have invested 10 billion into this. They're integrating it and launched it into Teams, into Bing. I thought Bing was dead, but who knew? It's coming back. Generative AI is also getting sued. So there is both shadow and light for these technologies. If we look at these generative AI systems across the labor market, 1 in 5 jobs, this is a report that came out yesterday from OpenAI, the people behind ChatGPT, that said 1 in 5 jobs have at least 50% of their tasks exposed to large language models. So what this means is some of the tasks that you're paid to do is going to be quicker, faster, better by using a technology like ChatGPT. So that's in areas of whether that's mathematics, whether it's in writing, whether it's in doing your taxes and tax returns, whether it's looking at complex data and placing that in. Let me remind you, $20 a month get you access to GPT-4. So everyone can have a co-pilot. In other areas, a couple of other examples, DeepMind's Alpha Code. So we currently have about 30 million people employed as software developers. And we put together scope, we manage them, we try and look at features, we do all of these pieces, and magically off they go, drinking their coffee and create our applications that we're looking for. DeepMind Alpha Code pitted against 5,000 human participants who are software developers, and it outperformed 45% of them. That's today. Next month, the month after, it'll be more and more. Some of the people I'm talking to are predicting that we won't have any human coders within the next 5 years. We will just talk what we want in the specs and the code will be created. GPT-4 is also multi-modality. So I can place an image. If you haven't seen the demo, I can draw a sketch of a web page on a napkin, place that image inside ChatGPT's interface, and it will build the code functioning for you within seconds. Full with JavaScript, Python, all of the pieces from your sketch. And then you'll interact with it. Can you make it this way? Can you do this? Can you add this piece? Entirely different from a few months ago to today. Not only coders, doctors, we've seen areas of AI where the diagnosis in competitive analysis, it outperforms. I believe there'll be a future point where it will be a state of negligence if a person has diagnosed without having been augmented with AI behind it. So correct diagnosis of these tumor pieces, 85% in 18 minutes, AI correctly diagnosed. The top neurologists, 64%, and it took them 50 minutes. Access to this in areas where we have no access to healthcare and education is going to be transformative across many countries that currently don't have access to this kind of technology, is going to be deployed at pennies. We've also just had the realization of a need of a new size of data size term, a yottabyte, which is a quadrillion gigabytes. The volume of data is doubling every 2 years. Moore's law, same in our computing power, number of transistors that are in there, it's been doubling every 2 years for 50 years with no sign of stopping. So all of this volume of data that's now labeled, accessible, is transforming what is possible. Google's CEO, Sundar, said AI, artificial intelligence, could be more profound than electricity and fire. This is so hard for us to understand because AI was first talked about 67 years ago. 67 years ago, AI was being talked about at a conference. Now it's been from hype, various moments, to the next hype right now, but it has some meat behind it. And what it's doing, if you're familiar with the 3 Horizon framework, great. If you're not, I'll give you a quick 60-second of it and then why this is now different. So if we think about the way we have products, services, and doing things, we analyze and work on the core of those to get them better. We do it through analysis, and we want to do innovation through productivity and efficiency. So make what we're doing last longer for the value. That's Horizon 1. Horizon 2, we get a disruption point where we're innovating through exploration. We're taking what we've done in core and we're making it slightly better, molding it for the next iteration of the way of doing something, the next product, the next service. And at some point it disrupts what was and it becomes the new core. And the things at Horizon 3, so this is normally 3 to 5 years out, that are the major disruptions that need imagination. And for many people within their organizations, they're trying to do all of these things at once, trying to look at how do we maximize what we've currently got as core? How do we innovate at those edges? And then how do we make sure we're really radically innovating at the far end? And we would normally have a time frame of 3 to 5 years where those disruption points happen, depending on industry. Some industries get disrupted and are innovating at different timescales. Imagine this is now concertinaed to 3 to 6 months. So something that was core, be it a skill, developers, an approach, to now being disrupted within 6 months. Each area of how you do your work, what work you're doing, is going to be radically transformed in the next few years, certainly within this decade. So I implore you to really realize this and listen to it. You know, Lewis Carroll talked about this, you know, we must run as fast as we can just to stay in place. And if we wish to go anywhere, we must run twice as fast as that. So it can feel overwhelming, it can feel exhausting, and we either put up armament, put up friction, not on my watch, don't believe it, not happening. We might embrace it, we might be fearful, or we might poo-poo it and say, no, that's all hype, it's not going to touch me in my town, in my village, in my industry, in my job and my work. Let me tell you, it will. And there'll be the companies that embrace these things, and then there'll be the ones that just don't exist. There'll be the roles that embrace it, and there'll be the ones that don't exist. So the reality of the teams and people that we lead and who we look after is that many of them aren't adapting enough. It's causing stress, anxiety, friction. And if we fail to get this right, it's going to cost money. It's going to impact performance. We're going to have an increase in mental health conditions and issues. And we're going to see much more increases of the disruption of job losses and organizational failures. And we want organizational failure on our terms. We want it for the things that are broken, no longer fit for purpose, to evolve to the next version that is more diverse, that is more inclusive, that is more accessible, that is more distributed. So Marshall Goldsmith in his book summarized this well. What got us here will not get us there. So the changes ahead are going to be so different. I cannot implore this enough to you, how different things are going to be. So we need a new operating system for us as human beings, for our teams and how we function. So in comes adaptability. There's no surprises now as to why a lot of these top experts, whether it's McKinsey, Deloitte, World Economic Forum, or LinkedIn Learning, that are putting adaptability and resilience as the top #1 skill that's in demand. They've been doing it for a few years. This is our focus as an organization, to help us understand how do we adapt successfully? How do we navigate these pieces? So as I shift now to think about how do we lead in this world? If that world is happening, and come with me, even if it's just for this session, that world exists. Even if you want to go back to, I live in a very quiet village, 300 people, no street lights, I love growing our veg and it's nice and quiet. But the reality is this is going on. This is happening. I was one of the first people in the UK to get one of Starlink's satellite internet connections in the UK. We had very poor internet connection, couldn't get any fiber, anything like that. Now, just plugged it in, point it to the sky, 300 meg. So for lots of rural and areas, we're getting connected. And the reality I want you to think about in these worlds is, in order to lead, we're not going through each of these phases over long periods of time or dealing with just one of them. So for example, you might be in a state of, actually, I'm thriving. I'm thriving at work. We're working on something that's having a profound difference. I'm taking something that was expensive, not very accessible, and now I can do it for better patient care. Donald was telling me about throat cancer detection using a sponge on a string, much more pleasant. That can be bringing about a thriving opportunity as that gets rolled out. What it's replacing is going into a collapse. So we're destruction in that disruption that's going on. It's destructive. If we fail to adapt to that, it will collapse without our desire. In that context, we are making it redundant. We might be in other areas of our lives and work, just survival. I'm just coping. I'm just at the point of overwhelm. I've got all this going on. Ross has just shared about all of these things, and I'm just starting to, deal with team members working with hybrid and remote, getting them on and functioning in Zoom or Teams, and how they do all of these things. We're getting that functioning. So we might be in survival mode. We might be in growth. So we're seeing things. Maybe a few of you have played with some of these technologies or are all over them. So you're seeing that positive disruption is coming from embracing that mindset. The reality I want you to understand is that these are happening all together in all areas of your company and teams and organizations, that you will have pockets in your life that are in survival, pockets that are in growth, pockets that are in thriving. So to lead in an unpredictable world, we need to understand those various disruption points, the various mindsets that are required to not go potty and end up with sharp objects in a dark room, but to actually smile and embrace these situations, to be able to avoid some of the negative consequences of a survival mentality and a collapse, and actually transform us into just existing in between those thriving and growth by being able to leverage high adaptability. As I shift now into a little bit about our model and our science as we come into the meat of the second half, we wanted to go and see what is adaptability from a scientific point of view. How can we begin to measure it? How can we begin to understand it? And so not only did we want to know the state of someone's adaptability, sort of the what, but to explain it into why. Why do different people adapt in different ways? And also then later start to understand how, and maybe even when they adapt. So if we think about a what as an outcome, we want some adaptability. We want to embrace the new environment, the new process, the new behavior, and the new system. So we want a form of outcome that is adaptability that could then drive things like innovation, could drive things like better sleep, could drive things like reducing stress, whatever it might be as outcomes that we want. What we have is elements of our character. So why would Rebecca adapt versus Deborah or Erin? It might be different. You might have different motivations. You might need a burning platform to get you to change and adapt, or you might need a burning ambition. So your motivation style might shift and change. What we then also have is a process in the middle of this between why and the what, and that can be parts of our experience. Paula can stand up, have the scrum, do the piece, and we have an experience of, we tried this and it didn't work. It didn't get the outcome we were looking for. So we have a variety of processes in the middle. And then what we have is a lot of hows. These are our skills. These are our abilities, things like resilience, like mental flexibility, like our grit is actually a skill. And then finally, we have, when is this happening? What's our environment? Do we have psychological safety in our team? Can I come up with and share, hey, I want to replace what we were doing with this interface called ChatGPT. Someone says, oh, I'm not sure about that. What about data privacy? What about if we access it there? It went from open, now it's closed. What's all of our concerns? So there's an environmental factor of when we adapt as individuals, as teams and organizations. So in an unpredictable world, we've got this balance between all of these different components that built out our scientific model of adaptability. So we scoured over 100 top research papers on how do you measure resilience? What's the BRS scale, using different professors and universities from around the world over the last 4 or 5 years to build out this robust model of adaptability. And if we think about that ACE model again, if we remember ability, character, and environment, it's answering 3 important questions. Ability is how and to what degree do I adapt? Those are the phrases and words like grit, mental flexibility, and mindset, resilience, and unlearning. Our character is looking to understand who adapts and why. So we have 5 subdimensions there, things like emotional range, extroversion, hope, motivation style, and thinking style. And a lot that's often forgotten, not looked at, and we might assess people on their skills, their capabilities, their personality, their profiles. We need to understand when in their environment, the company support, the emotional health, the team support, work environment, and work stress. And a great question from Erin, for example, about extroversion. Do only extroverts adapt? Great question. So if we look at character, that isn't on a adapt or doesn't adapt. It's on why they adapt. So introverts and extroverts both adapt, but we want to understand why they adapt so we can connect in and not be against compliance or friction, but be in flow. So how can we understand that character of how they adapt? It's not good or bad, but if you don't know it as a manager or as an individual, then you can't harness it and you can't maximize that of the character profiles of how we might interface with different people. So I'd like you to think about, just in the starting point, I'm going to frame a little bit of the first 5 abilities. And I want you to think about this, of what, at this level of understanding that you have, what do you feel instinctively might be most important to you for success and performance in your role? So grit is about staying the course and following through when it's on long-term goals. It's about passion and perseverance. That's our grit. Mental flexibility. So can we appreciate and adopt different viewpoints, different perspectives, competing demands and ideas, different ways of solving it? Do we have the flexibility to not only ideate, but appreciate and maybe accept and adopt different viewpoints cognitively? Our mindset. So this is about, from the point of view, not necessarily Carol Dweck's around growth mindset and fixed mindset, although there are elements of that. It's, do you perceive change on the whole is likely to result in good things or bad things? What is your mindset? Again, these are skills. These are muscles that are learnable and improvable. And the last 2, resilience. So that capacity, when we have a setback, when something doesn't go right, when, oh, I love doing it this way and I'm no longer allowed to, can we recover from that setback, from that difficulty? Does it take us a long time? Do we weep in the bedroom and not get up for a month when something doesn't go right? Do we need our best buddy and our mum to call us and, you know, coax us through? What's our resilience level right now? And unlearning might be a new term for some of you. This isn't about forgetting. This is about, when we have new information presented to us, can we reassess and rethink, apologies, can we reassess and rethink those methodologies that are no longer relevant because we now have new information coming in? So just take a moment and pop in the chat which one you feel is important for you in your role and your performance. So I'm just going to give you a moment to do that. You're starting to come in. Some people curious about unlearning. Maybe that's important. Mindset and unlearning, mental flexibility, mindset. Great, great, great. Resilience. I think we've all needed resilience over the last few years for sure. Mindset, all equal importance. I like that, Erin. Interesting. To me, at least, to shift between them at different times. Yep. So our intelligence, when do we deploy different skills? When are they required? It's contextual, right? Okay. Debbie, if you mean now, maybe mental flexibility. Maybe because of what I presented, might be something new or different ways of thinking. So we've got about 15 minutes left before then opening up to maybe some questions and some opportunities to steer my content around what you would like to hear and see. Thank you for thinking and sharing about that. What we now want us to think about and begin to shift in is, how do we move forward better? So if we have this information, if we understand what's going on in the world, and we come to the conclusion that adaptability is really important for me to be able to thrive in this new environment, in this new world of work, in what's going on, what are the steps that I can take in order that I can lead effectively in that, help others, support others that might struggle? And what are some of the insights that might then impact my business and the wider context of maybe some of my industries? So I've got an option here. This is an activity that we run just as a very first easy starting point to start some reflection. And there's 2 slides here of reflection. It takes us about 10 minutes to go through. And my suggestion is, if you've got a pad or a pen or paper near to you, maybe you can do a little bit of thinking now, or I encourage you to do this within the next 48 hours, to just take a moment to do this first 2-step exercise to start to map about what's happening, what's going on, and what are you adapting to. So I'll just walk you through a couple of these prompts and a couple of these areas. So there will be in your life something that has changed. Give you a time frame. What has changed for you in the last 30 days? What's changed in your work? What's changed in your life? And we start to look at those and put a few pieces in. I'm just going to run through the first 3 to start with. Then I really want you to think about, is anything brand new? Or is it just something similar and a few little tweaks masquerading as some change? Or is it absolutely brand new to you? Is anything like that happened? And equally, it's important when we're looking at unpredictable, some things might have stayed the same in the landscape of your work. Maybe you're working on the same problems or challenges. Maybe the how has changed. Maybe you are or aren't working with the same people. Maybe you might have some similar things of, I still care about human beings and their feelings, and whether they are loved. Maybe that's a consistent, something that has stayed the same, of some of your beliefs and some of your values. So if you take a moment, I'll, in the chat, put a yes, just the letter Y, if you want to have a moment to do this live, or put a no, want to come back to it later, move on to the next piece of content, and I'll take a quick poll from there. Yes, if you want a moment just to think about this, do this exercise live, or put an N in there if you want me to move on and cover more ground of content, and you can do this from there. So let's just take a poll from people. Okay, first 4 in. I'll get a couple of little moments just for a few others. Brilliant. Okay, I'm going to take that as you can work on this. It's very easy to do. And the other part that you'll see on the sheet there is to think about how prepared do you feel your people and teams and workforce are for the 1 to 3 years ahead, given the first 20 minutes of today, of the session, given all of that information about what's happening in the world of technology that may be not new to you, or it could be new. How prepared do you think your workforce and your team are for the 1 to 3 years ahead? The next step, so I'm going to move forward and just frame this up for you if you're doing it on the recording or you've downloaded the slide deck afterwards. is when we've looked at what's happened in that landscape of your work, what's changed, what's brand new and what stayed the same, let's think about the impact. So has that impacted your productivity? Has it impacted your team's productivity? Has it gone up or down as a result of the reflection on the first sheet? What about the level of innovation, radical innovation, maybe creeping from horizon 2 to horizon 3? Some of those things that some people might see, oh, that's lunacy. We can't teleport people to different places. I can't do remote surgery yet. That's just in science fiction, or maybe that's just in a few areas of the world, but it hasn't been deployed en masse. So has your radical innovation gone up? Has your teams, or has it gone down? And the other impact that's really important to reflect on is your mental well-being. Do you feel more vitality? Are you getting good sleep? Has it gone up? Has it gone down? Are you feeling more anxious? Are you feeling more stressed? Are you feeling more calm and relaxed? Are you doing more breath work? What is it that's happening for you around that impact? So I want you to have a little think about that. So as I shift to the next final sort of pieces about some steps and other actions, one of the challenges that many people and organizations are facing right now, brought on predominantly accelerated by the pandemic, is a hybrid challenge. We've been doing it. Some people have just been resilient, been coping, and others are now realizing, is that the way I want to do things? Some companies are saying, no, you must come back. Others are figuring out different ways and saying, no, always remote. So what's happening around morale or well-being? Is that at risk if we're in isolation? Can I get a court sense of how Paula's feeling if I only ever see her a few times on the Zoom meetings versus when we're hanging out in the same space? And I can get the energy of what's going on or what's happening. Or Erin, who, you know, is going through the process of from one dog in the family who's passed to a new dog who comes. We might not know some of these things. So we've got a risk of potential social disconnection if we just come on to Zoom and become task rabbits, and we're not looking and understanding the need for connection. So we might have stories going on in our heads when we're not connected to other people in different ways in that hybrid part. We can miss things of new processes needed or creation or training. We can find it hard on Zoom, you know, like me. Many of you, I think, will probably be living on Zoom or Teams, and it's really exhausting. We're trying to read all these emotions of people's faces as we would naturally do, to go, shut up, Ross, move on, to, oh, no, I'm getting the energy from somebody by trying to see them in a little box, in a little window. So we're seeing increases in burnout. We're seeing many industries radically transform. And this short-term coping, what are the new structures, environments we need in hybrid to make us thrive? So we need this radical adaptability and rethinking how we shift and how we function. And we must get to this state of growth and thriving. And if we're in collapse and survival, be in there just momentarily. So we're being in there, we recognize it, we understand it, but we have the skills. We know the characteristics of who needs support and when, and we provide the environments that can foster the support, the understanding, the inclusion, the diversity of thought, to be able to get us into creative modes and positive transformation. So this rapid experimentation, we've gone from a knowledge economy where the answers were valuable and experience was valuable, to where experience is less valuable when we're in an unpredictable world. So leaders now need to transition from the answers and experience to speed of learning and rapid experimentation. We need to practice foresight and scenario planning. We need to then leverage AI augmentation and the access that we now have to personal co-pilots through technology that can accelerate our learning in this increased pace and world. So let me just reiterate that, going from knowledge, answers, and experience into speed of learning, experimentation, foresight and scenario planning, and being able to leverage some of that. Some of the steps that we can do is start to look at AI augmenting our ability to do those things at speed and scale, and personal co-pilots to help us along the way. Our blind spots, our biases, I can't read every scientific journal that exists out there. AI can give me new perspectives that I might not understand. Of course, I might need to fact check that. At the moment, it still has the habit of some hallucinations where it makes up stuff. But in a few months' time, in a few years' time, what will that be like? So step 3, we must deploy an investment in adaptability programs now. We've got to proactively expand the support for our mental health and well-being of our people. We've got to recognize that all of this, everywhere I step, is a treadmill on level 10. So I'm on it, I'm going, I'm so exhausted, I'll get off it, and all I find is I'm on another treadmill at level 10. What happens is we fall on our face and it hurts. We have setbacks, we have various things. So we need to shift and transcend above those treadmills so that we can support continual innovation, that we can have a critical capability that allows us to thrive through each market change, through each transition. And this VUCA world, we must invest in learning and development programs for our people that are at speed and scale, that are personalized, that understand the relevancy of how everyone adapts differently, how we learn differently. We must make sure that we become more decentralized in the way that we educate. It no longer can be centralized and one piece for all. It has to be at the point of requirement, so learning in line with life through experimentation and regular sharing as we go through. So how do we deploy some of these adaptability programs? You can run pilots within our assessment program. It begins, if we want to improve something, we've got to know where we are. So you must know your baseline. Our AQ-Me assessment looks at that: who, how, and when. Gives you the reports across those 15 dimensions. When you have that at an individual level and at team levels, and you start to filter the data, you can start to get more personal. You can align communications and messaging to individual motivators or styles, rather than, oh, okay, I'll do that because you've told me, to, oh, I can't wait to do that. I'm going to be a champion of that shift, because you've aligned in flow with me, not because you've thought that's the way of doing it. A lot of leadership tend to say, oh, it's about the gain, it's about the win. Maybe others might be motivated about protecting what exists. So if we align our communications, we can get the outcomes that we're looking for. Engage by learning that language of AQ, of adaptability, so that we can be more resilient and more experimental in our mindsets. And the final few pieces here of some use cases. So whether it's around employee wellness, change and transformation, digitizations, driving innovation, company culture, this is happening in organizations right now. We have about 2,000, just over 2,000 organizations on the platform that are using it in all sorts of different ways. So from in finance to logistics, to pharmaceuticals, to technology companies like Microsoft. A few more questions for you to think about when you reflect after today's session. What flexibility do you and your workforce need in order to meet the demand and supply in the short term? Remember, 1 in 5 roles, 50% of those tasks are at risk of large language model disruption. So what that means is that it can be done by technology better, quicker, faster, rather than, oh, have I got a grade C student doing this? You can have a grade A+ student in every area of your organization supporting that human being for $20 a month. Imagine what's possible in 6 months' time, in a year's time. So what flexibility do you need for your workforce to meet that new demand? How do you sustain that potential demand for increased mobility? So whilst we've got this challenge around recruitment and retention, and the internal mobility from task to task, what does that traditional ladder of career path now become a broad portfolio of different areas of deployment and mobility? How quickly can you deploy people into new areas and new parts of the organization, both remotely and in person? And what future expectations do your teams have of you as employers to remain engaged, to remain productive, to not be disengaged and say, oh, well, what's the point? Robots are coming. I'll just go and sit on the sofa and watch Netflix. How do they contribute? Where are they contributing? Where do they see value in the future? So as an organization, we believe everyone deserves this access to these best minds, the best coaches, the best training content in the world, regardless of their location, their wealth, their background, or their career. And if we're providing this clarity on who adapts, how they adapt, and when, then we can turn this insight into, augmented with exponential technologies, we can give truly personalized one-to-one coaching and training at scale, empowering everyone to thrive and live their best lives, one with hope, happiness, and confidence about the future. In the short space where we're getting to that technology, or we may choose, we want to have not just technology, but real people. Are you ready to join this fastest growing global AQ community to help you lead in this unpredictable world? We have over 250 so far certified coaches across 43 countries that now understand the science of adaptability, understand how to analyze the data and deploy and help you through your projects and transformation and change programs. The final steps, what actions, what have we got for you? We have some reports. Donald mentioned the books. Reach out to us at partnerships@aqai.io if you're thinking about how can I deploy this with my teams? We're going through this challenge. How do I get started? What do the pilots look like? How can we become assessed? And there's a little extra piece that I've created for you because it's so now and so transformative and so relevant, is I've created a small guide and report on the impact of GPT-4 and stable diffusion, which I didn't talk about. That's where we put in text and it will create an image for us. That's doing some profound impacts and work. So what is the impact on team leaders and employees? And you can get a link to the Google Doc so you can see live all of the things in there about each of these areas, why it matters, what are the details, what's the impact, and even some prompts to try in GPT-4 for you to go further and learn more about each of these different pieces. So if you want to improve productivity and efficiency, what do you do? What's the impact? And here's some prompts for you to explore and learn within there. We're bang on the hour here at 8 o'clock here in the UK. I know that we have 30 minutes left. I'd like to leave that open for Q&As. And linked to those Q&As, I teased you at the beginning of bonus. I do have some insights from the few people that did take the assessment, if we wanted to look at some of those results, some of that data and what it means. So thank you for listening to me for the last 45 minutes or so. I hope you may have accidentally learned something, shifted your mindset, and realized that we are all adaptable, choosing how much we invest in that to make sure that we can have a high frequency, leaving no one behind, and avoid those sharp objects and dark rooms. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Ross. That's really, really informative, very insightful. Whilst it's great to see the possibilities of chat in GPT, I'm also slightly scared. It leaves you with this slight fear. So yeah, so I'd like to open up some questions. Would anyone like to ask questions or put some questions in the chat?
So yeah, pop some questions in the chat. Just to your point, Paula, like with all things and human beings, we have some risks. We get some things wrong. In that document, I did outline a few of some of those warnings, some things to be aware of, whether it's about data privacy, biases, transparency and explainability, ethical considerations. Let's not forget, I mentioned it's being sued. There's all sorts of things within some of these disruptive technologies that are looking there. So let's have a look at some of the questions. Thank you for framing that, Paula. So how and where do we get the bonus resources? Absolutely great. So in the deck that we send out for this and in some of the recordings, we'll add all of the links. I can pop some of them in the chat right now. So let me do that. I think this should work for everyone. So some of the links are, it doesn't maintain the links. Okay, so I will make sure that those get sent out for some of the direct links. If you want to go onto Amazon for any of the books, those two or any of the other 3 or 4 that I've written about innovation or change. And some of the other pieces, you can go onto our site, aqai.io. You can get access to the business case if you want to run a pilot, and we'll share some of those assets as well. It's a great question. I'll be interested to hear the insights from the tests. Debbie, great, I can do that. Do you believe and practice, let's have a look, in clear quantified objectives to transform towards? Maybe, Tom, would you like to come off mute and just give me a little bit more context to that question, and I'll see if I can share some thoughts there. So yeah, Tom, would you like to?
Okay, I'm off of mute. Can you hear me?
Sure can. Yeah, great.
Okay, so yeah, I'm kind of tired of a world of leaders who have nice sounding phrases like we need to have a tremendous transformation in the direction of productivity. I believe that any worthy goal or set of goals can be quantified so it's excruciatingly clear and you can measure any progress towards the goal. So the question is, do you believe in quantified long-term transformation objectives, or do you believe in management bullshit?
Is that a trick question? Because
yeah,
I'm not sure
intensely provocative.
Yeah.
But so you didn't show any examples. You didn't show any examples. Maybe they come out in the test, the case studies.
Yeah, that's a good piece. So I can share some examples. We run regular events like masterminds every month where we go through and say, this was an organization, they were facing this challenge, for example. This is what they current scores were. This is what they did. These were not only the score shifts of quantitative data, but we also then had these outcomes in terms of this amount of time saved, or this innovation now was deployed within that organization of those things. So
good. I take that as a yes, and I'd like to see more details.
100%. Yeah, I'd love to share some of those with you, Tom. And it's very important to balance those things of the factual data that we can measure, some things that are important we can't measure, other things that are important that are not measured but should be. And we as an organization are about the data, about measurement. Hey, we invested over $1 million in the science and research of assessing adaptability scientifically to give us numbers against each of these things. And they had to be linked to a business outcome rather than, we can measure it, that's nice, resilience. Does it link to a business outcome is what was important. So great question, Tom. Thank you for that. And the answer is yes. I'll just look at a few others in the chat here. I know that one of you mentioned you'd like to see some of the insights, so I'll do that. So it's Tom, interested with, where's focused, thank you. Practicalities, AI in the workforce to complement or replace it. Interested to know what we will think. Debbie M can come on to, I can give some examples of how we've already started using it to increase our productivity or efficiency that might be helpful for some of you. Some about the book. Okay, let me share, shall I? Because there's not any major other questions, just a few areas from, we had 10 people from this community who did the assessment. Now, the way the platform functions is you will have got your own individual report, but on the platform, if you're a champion, a team lead, or a certified coach, you can run multiple companies and multiple teams and slice that data in interesting ways. So you can look at it in terms of what's the adaptability profile of, say, people who've been in the organization over 10 years. So you can split it by certain demographics. You can split it by job roles, by geographies, so different ways. So what I've done, although these 10 people who've taken the assessment probably don't function as a team, so that you're working in all sorts of different teams, I've collected some of that data from the platform to just share a few insights from you. So for example, within resilience, of those 10, we have 5 of you, so 50%, who have high levels of resilience. So what that means, as a quick highlight for you, is that setbacks don't affect them very much. They move on very quickly. They can recover quickly around it. They have this high capacity for those setbacks. So what I'm looking at is this right-hand box of a couple of bullets of what does that mean for that distribution, those 5 people within this team. So they're less likely to experience workplace stress because there's a strong correlation between resilience and work stress. So we can also analyze the data in interesting ways. And they're likely to be more open to radical transformation because they are resilient, so setbacks aren't affecting them so negatively. If we look on the left-hand side, there's 40%, so 4 people out of those 10 who have low levels of resilience. So maybe their battery's drained, they take a long time to recover. So what happens is they tend to avoid challenges because they don't have the ability to recover from them. So they take a long time, they need often support to recover from it. And if you don't know this, the resilience of somebody in that it's low, you might be, if they're not talking to you or communicating or having a spidey sense, need some support. Maybe until it's really critical when they come and ask and need some support from that setback. So they'll often seek stability. So if you're trying to implement a new process, a new piece of software, new technology, whatever it may be, and that might be disruptive for them, if they've got low levels of resilience, they're looking for stability, they might be putting up some friction, some barriers around the deployment of that and challenging you. They have a reduced appetite for new things and have a potential higher risk for workplace stress. So as I mentioned, there's a correlation between resilience and work stress. So those negative situations that people will experience in work, for 4 of them are going to have a big impact. For 5 of them, not so much. And then there's one sort of in the middle that you'll see, but I won't go through in detail. That's, give me time and I'll be okay. So that's one of the abilities, is resilience. It's learnable, it's developable, so we can improve our resilience. So we can deploy activities, we can employ training, interventions to improve our resilience. The next insight from this group of 10 is our mental flexibility. So this is our cognitive flexibility. So can we have new ideas that maybe are opposing and not go potty? In this group of 10, there's not high levels of mental flexibility. So what I know from that is those 10 people that I've presented today to will probably have a tough time with some of the information I've presented, in that there might be, I'm not sure about some of those things. So I want to stick with what I've got. So for 4 of them, I haven't got time to find a new way. They're probably experiencing problems that resurface many times. They feel up against it. They're hard to manage competing demands. So are challenged around those areas. Probably pursue the clarity of one goal rather than multiple projects and multiple goals. So they haven't got the mental flexibility to deal with that. Again, imagine if you didn't know this and you're just getting frustrated because that team member's not able to multitask or prioritize different things. If their skill of mental flexibility doesn't exist very much yet and they need some support and training, that can be the underlying reason that you might be having challenges with some of your team members or work when you're looking at diverse projects. But they are very good at following single plan, single route, don't need flexibility. I'm process driven. I'm just going to follow that through. That was great yesterday. Most of those things technology will do for us, certainly now or very soon. So it's going to be really important that those people are given some support. And the ones in the middle, which is the majority of the 50% here, sounds interesting. I want to know a bit more. So I've got some levels of mental flexibility. Conflicting goals can be a little bit draining, but they're open to a few new perspectives. And it will depend on the context. So Tom mentioned about, an objective or a goal. If that objective or goal really resonates with them, they might be more flexible about the approaches and ideas that come to it. Okay.
Ross, you may not be able to see, but Debbie has her hand up. So I wondered if you were okay to take a question. If that's okay.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Hi there. Thanks. The reason I thought I'd put my hand up is because I did the assessment, and this is an area where I found I wondered if the wording of the questions maybe was a bit confusing or not as clear as it was for some of the other areas. Because, for example, if it's on the mental flexibility, so we're talking about the competing demands and the contradictory tasks. I think it depends very much what you mean. For example, if it's, I don't know, I've got 5 tasks to do and I need to work out how much time I'm going to spend on them, according to which is the highest priority at the current time, that's fine. If it's that they are completely conflicting demands, like, I don't know, if one of them was sack somebody and the other one was re-employ the same person, that would be a problem because they're just totally conflicting and it doesn't really make sense to do the same thing. And I think that's part of the job of a manager, is to make sure that you aren't giving people objectives or demands that are conflicting in that way. Whereas if it's like, you know, there's a few ways that you could approach a particular problem and you want to consider different options, that's fine again. The things that for me, it's that I think the sort of contradictory tasks, to me, that wording just jarred. It didn't make any sense. Yeah. And I don't know if that, because I'm surprised that the mental flexibility for the group as a whole would be so low. And I wonder if that might be why.
Could be. I think from our research, and again, the balance between some of the questions in psychometrics are framed purposely to be challenging or difficult and opposing. So they might be asked 2 or 3 times in different ways to validate and test. Let's remember this assessment is a self-assessed piece as well, and it can shift and change. So this is a small proportion of this community of 10 people, and it's contextual as well. So depending on what their mindset was and state at that particular point, they will answer in certain ways. So as a organization or a leader, when you deploy these, it's important to understand what's the setting that you're giving this out to. Is it where a company is under pressure, they're making redundancies, and they will then go, I need to answer this so I don't get sacked, because if I'm not adaptable, I'll get sacked, versus another company's context might be, oh, we're looking to develop people, we're really invested in the learning and development, and they might answer it in these sorts of ways. So one is the understanding of difficult language or questions. Sorry, go on.
I was just saying, I'm quite familiar with doing psychometric tests, and the fact that the same question is presented in multiple different ways with slightly different wording to try and test that it is a consistent answer, or to identify if it's not. What I'm saying is, I think the wording of these specific questions in some cases, for me, it just didn't quite make sense. Difficult. I wondered if there was a tweak to the wording that would better get across the point that was trying to be got across.
That's helpful, and that feedback is good on specifics as well, because about 70% of the assessment is based on existing scientific research where the questions have been placed and validated. That's not us. We've made that up with some professors. It's this report, this piece, these questions with these results, with this level of people taking part, that we have then been able to say, we can replicate that for reliability or validity in our context. But we're always looking to adapt and improve. And one of the challenges we've found is understanding, and some of the language questions, when you also add in, then it's currently in 5 or 6 languages. So it's in Spanish and French and German, and you've got different interpretations of some of those. So yeah, that's a really helpful point. Sorry, was it Debbie?
Yeah, that's right. Debbie. I think somebody else has put a comment in the chat saying there's a difference between partial and total conflict. And I think maybe that might have been a useful tweak to make in the wording. Yeah, so a partial really conflict, that's fine, but total conflict, unless you're pursuing deliberately 2 different options to sort of see how they run and see then which one you want to go with, or maybe you want to go with both. Yeah, for me, that would have helped with the wording.
I'll put that into the professors and the pieces. There is, as you experienced questions, there are unique questions asked for different people based on previous questions. So the roots are different because it's an AI-based conversational. So you might have slightly different to somebody else's. And likewise, the weighting of those questions are not uniform or unique. So different questions have different impact on the scores in different ways. So it's quite a complex algorithm that's behind it, but really helpful to get feedback on where some things might be difficult or challenging for people to understand, or it's ambiguous, like you say, between, you know, total conflict or partial conflict. So that's really helpful. I've got a couple of other slides I'd like to share just on some of the other dimensions and other areas that I think is helpful. So another one was around mindset. So this particular one within the group of 10, remember this is relevant to adaptability and work. So we have mindsets that show up in all areas of our lives. Are we, you know, positive in terms of family or work, or how we feel about different things? This is how we feel about change, how we feel about change and adaptation. And in this group of these 10 is the experience so far is that change doesn't really and hasn't resulted in good. So tended to have more of a pessimistic outlook on the future, believe that those changes result in bad outcomes, that, you know, seeking ways to avoid change. Maybe they work in risk, compliance, and areas where change is not a good thing. So they're trying to protect against certain changes. So it's contextual, but in this group and these results, the mindset around change is currently that it's not a good thing. So again, this was a really good opportunity. I know it's only 10 and there's, you know, a lot more in this community, for me to come in and present some of these things about, hey, change can be good. It can result in some of these things. Maybe we can solve some problems for, you know, education in Africa, or around climate change, or all these sorts of things that we need change. For this group, there's an overwhelming for those 10 where change has not been a good thing and tends to not cope with change very well and want and seek more stability. There's a couple that took the assessment that were on the other side. So 20% were very high, leads to growth. All change is going to be good, have high levels of self-belief, have confidence around achieving some of those goals. So it's important to know this, and that it can be, let's remember, mindset is improvable. It's learnable. We can shift this. We can tell stories of where change has been good. We have to overwhelm good because our brains respond and react better to bad, and we remember them, they imprint more. And so we need an overwhelming experience and evidence of good to override some of those things that's happened. Also, remember, it is in that moment. So what has happened to us? For a lot of us, we've just gone through a big shift of the pandemic. We've had to shift many things. So our mindset is going to be affected by our environment of what's going on. The last couple, we've got 9 minutes left. So team support.
Rob, sorry to interrupt. Rob's got his hand up. So I think if it's related to the slides, it might be worth taking the question. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. I wonder why I can't see any of the, I suppose I'm just looking at the videos. Is it in the participants piece, Paula?
Yeah, it is. You can see the hands up through the participants if you have the participants open, as well as the chat. Yeah.
Who was it, if they want to come?
It was Rob.
Rob.
Yeah.
Hi, Rob.
And it is a little bit related to the Slido. It's more related to the fact that there's a couple of things I'm trying to work out. So probably two different questions. One is probably the easier one, which is, as you mentioned, a lot of this is self-assessed. There's a lot of flow that goes in, and because it's a measurement, and I'm not going to explain Goodhart's law, but we all know measures and targets. Mm-hmm. So what is the level of gamification on this within, I mean, when you implement this, or when you're trying to look at this, how much do you find that there's a gamification? That's one question. The other question, which may or may not be related, is at the moment you're showing these dimensions individually, which is basically good data, but I'm wondering how they interact, and we can get the kind of the higher level insight into how everything ties together to get something more actionable.
Great. So two parts. First part, gamification. What I understand to that is giving maybe false results, or not true nature of. So the answer to that, from the data that we've got, we look at that through distribution curves against all of them. So the histograms to look at, is there a good level from the left-hand side to the right-hand side of each of these dimensions across the audiences that we're getting the results from. And we have got across, so we did an analysis last August of 2,000 results. We've now got 6,000 or 7,000 results, where predominantly we have a good distribution curve. So one of the pieces of, there are so many self-assessments, is, am I doing this because I want, trying to get a result for my boss or somebody else? So part of it is, what's the context that you've done? Another part is the design. We talked about that earlier, and Debbie mentioned familiar with psychometrics to try and make sure we've got authentic answers. The other is the modality. So we've looked at some research from DARPA and various places where we are more likely to give an authentic view of ourselves to an inanimate element, i.e. an AI chatbot, than a human. So we've got some evidence around why we chose that modality to get the information out there. But there is always the fundamental flaw of, you know, am I reporting knowingly wrong for my objective or outcome to undervalue or overvalue, or unknowingly wrong because I haven't got the ability to assess myself? So there's still that component. We're building out a few elements, both in the design, the tech, and also bringing in 360 views. So Paula can do one on Andrew, etc., so that will build more holistic parts, and data from other sources. So not from just a self-assessed, but in the future from other areas that impact our adaptability. So whether that's genomic information or sleep data from a wearable, we're working to continually understand the best knowledge and information of who, why, when, and how people adapt. Your second part question was around the insights and the complexities of things. So in our courses and certifications, we go into the data science, the correlations, how do they function against each other, and in the platform for, depending on your access level, because those who've taken it just get the lowest level of just their individual report, being able to access then actions, interventions, additional insights that are inside there. So something we're working on, continually improving. So hopefully that answered both of the questions. We're not seeing too much gamification of everyone's all going 777 or whatever it might be. We're seeing a good distribution of, by both the positioning, design, and setting it up. There's some fundamental bits we can't change with a self-assessment that some may, you know, game it. And the piece about more insights, yes, there are some in the platform of some of the actions. I've just shown here a couple of headlines and pieces that I wanted to share.
That's excellent, and yeah, that does answer. You also raised the point I was thinking of asking about, which was the 360. So
perfect.
Excellent.
All right. Any other questions, Paula, that I've missed? I know we've got 4 minutes left. We've got 2 or 3 other slides that might be interesting.
There were a couple of in the chat.
Yep.
I don't know if anyone else would like to put their hands up just now, but there were a couple in the chat otherwise. So Andrew had asked about, if augmentation is so good, how are you going to increase the trust in the technology? Tesla driver assistance killed quite a few people. Andrew, if you want to answer the question about trust in technology.
Trust in technology.
But just a little bit further.
Andrew, got it. So if augmentation is so good, how are you going to increase the trust in technology? Tesla driver assistant has killed quite a few people. So I think my view on that, Andrew, is a few parts. So trust in technology, it will depend on the unique deployment of what the use case is. So for example, would I trust my doctor who was trained 20 years ago on a diagnosis, or would I trust something that's trained on the latest piece that's more accurate than maybe the doctor's level of knowledge or information of their education? So in that context, I'd probably want a bit of both. I'd want a bit of the technology to underpin it, but then to be made sure, still at this stage, does it make sense? So having a surgeon or physician or whatever augmented that. Trust, for example, another healthcare one. So my father just had, alongside a couple of bouts of cancer, and Donald, when you mentioned about throat cancer, he went through throat cancer. He had a knee operation, a knee replacement, and he specifically went to a treatment where it was robotic assisted because the outcomes are better. So we already have the data to show that certain technology and augmentation improves outcomes of certain things. And then to your final point, I'm sure we can go into countless other examples. So Tesla driver assistant has killed quite a few people. I'm pretty confident in that humans have killed more people and will kill more people. I know Tesla hasn't deployed as many as we have human drivers, but it's one of the highest causes of death in a number of countries is road traffic accidents. And we have people who are, drink, get sick, going to be bad drivers. At least at a whole, we can look at a system-wide driver assistance to be able to augment and improve some of those areas. But there will be some failures. There'll be some failures, but hopefully less failures in certain areas than if we had the same human doing some of those areas. So yeah, trust is a challenge. It will also do some things that we don't expect and we don't want as a second order effect or third order effect of some of these things. So it's about taking a pragmatic approach to these things and embracing it with open arms and open eyes, but not naively. So a great question, Andrew. And of course, comes down to elements of mindset as well in those things. So Texas has the 3 safest cars ever made. Tesla's, see Musk's method for book above. Yeah, they are very high rating in terms of their safety in accidents, in crashes. Yeah, an interesting one, but that's slightly different to say autonomous driving for it. All right, any other? I think we're at the final witching hour. Is there anything else that I've missed?
There was one other question. Debbie did ask it quite a bit earlier, so sorry about this, but I have put it back in the chat so you can see it, Ross, about the practicalities of AI in the workforce to complement or replace it. I'm interested to know which you think it will be.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I'll try and answer that in a few ways. So AI is in so many different areas. If we just look at the example of the general piece of, say, ChatGPT-4 versus all sorts of other AI that it might be doing diagnosis of conditions to very high statistical analysis of data to predict how CRISPR can re-engineer our genome or all sorts of areas there. If we just look at something that's accessible to you and I in having a conversation with a chatbot, where I think it will really help is tasks of creation of content that is written, whilst we can also create video content and film content, is that we can explore areas. So for example, we create a lot of training programs, and maybe some of you do as well, in terms of you have a new thing that you're wanting to then implement out to other people, a new process, a new area. You'll need an instructional designer, a domain expert, knowledge in that area. Who's the audience? Who are we trying to train? What are we trying to train them about? And that would normally take a number of sessions, number of weeks, number of different people to pull that together. And for us, we'd get a course up and running over a series of weeks and months to create that content and valid through. I was able to create a 28-unit course in an area of where I've got some expertise by feeding it existing content that we have of materials, saying who the audience is and expanding out what are some of the challenges those audiences face. Gave me some new blind spots that I wasn't aware of. And here's content, make that into a video script. It's very good at then surmising large content into small amounts of content that are very succinct within a tonality that is unique to you. So one of the unique parts in this version 4 is we can do something called steering. So I can get it to answer me in a particular fashion. So answer me as a instructional designer with 20 years experience versus answer me as a school teacher and I'm a 10-year-old. So we can steer it to what responses we're wanting, and then tone, be more casual or professional, use short, succinct words, no jargon words. So we can steer it in that way. So from a content production, 28 units, video material, create then the workbook around that. I want reflective questions, key insights, actions against each of those. and then all the material that surrounds that in under a day by prompt engineering backwards and forwards of each of those pieces. So you've got the raw materials of, say, a 120-page raw material document that can now be produced into those unique areas of videos or workbooks or those sorts of things. So using it as your muse, as your assistant for creation of content material. If you're doing reports that you've got to do, feed it the raw information and say, I want a summary of this report for my manager on progress that's showing these things. I want 5 strategies on how we could overcome this challenge. That's one way. Another way is you've got developers coding. It can code very, very well for you. So you can put in normal language information and it will output the code for you in JavaScript, in Python, in CSS, in each of these things that then you can give a developer to, or a developer can use it in a way in which I want to do this function, I want this to happen in normal semantic language, and it will deploy you a good starter for 10 coded section that you can copy and paste and put into your applications, into your web, into those sorts of things. So in terms of some things right now that are accessible where GPT-4 can be applied to your roles, surmising text, creating written code is very, very good. So my suggestion is go and play. Go and tell it what you're up to. Go and ask it, how can it help? I'm doing this. What would be a good prompt for me to find out more? And that, I think, is the attitude that I want you to take away, is to go and experiment, go and play, go and see and surprise yourself. I started off, just super quick, Christmas present for one of our grandchildren has got one of these Tonys. It's little characters you put on top of a speaker and it reads a story. And we wanted to make some bedtime stories. So we know that our grandchild loves raspberries, goblins, various things. So we said, can you write a story for a 4-year-old boy named X who likes raspberries and this? And it came up with a beautiful story that we went, oh, can you make it more magical? Can you set it in a British forest? So it, you know, knew that you'd have badgers, this in a British forest and all these characters. So we were able to create 10 stories that were really interesting and magical by working backwards and forwards in one afternoon, that were relevant, personalized and cool. So we started with that and then started to deploy it in work, in sales, in marketing, in content creation, in all sorts of areas. I know we've overrun slightly, but hopefully that gives you some real examples of what we've been using.
Well, thank you so much, Ross. That's been brilliant. Really informative, really enjoyed it. We've got some great feedback in the chat as well. So really appreciated you having you here. Thanks for coming along to speak to us. And so that's great. I think in terms of the recording we've got here, we'll put a link to that. You talked about some bonus resources. Ross, hopefully we'll be able to get a link and we'll be able to put that in the
we'll get them shared out. I'll get the deck. We'll share that out as well.
Brilliant.
And do reach out to us if you've got any questions or thoughts or thinking, oh, would it work here? We've got this challenge, or we've got this team or this group that are facing this. How might you be able to help? And we can put you in touch with either ourselves or some of our certified partners that have worked in just about every industry in all sorts of areas with different challenges. So we'd love to put you in touch with them.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Ross. So that's us for this evening. Just before we go, to see our next session is on the 12th of April. We're going to have Bob Galen along. He's going to talk about Everyone is an Agile Coach. Just to say that this is Bob's book. I don't know if you see that. I've not got a brilliant camera. So yeah, it's a bit fuzzy because I've got the
great name.
the right setting on. It is the extraordinarily badass agile coaching. You can't see because I've got the wrong
magic. Love it.
Just about there. So that's based on his book. So he'll be along on the 12th of April to speak to us. So please join us. That'd be lovely to see everybody. Thank you very much to everyone for coming. And yes, thanks again to Ross. Really appreciate it. So have a good evening, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Take care.
Bye now.
Go and
Take
experiment.
care.
Go and play. Bye-bye.
Sounds good. Bye now.
Thanks, Ross. Thanks, folks, for joining us.
Thank you, Ross. Great.
Thanks, Tom.